Despite a number of historical legal successes in recent years, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex individuals continue to face monumental challenges in their attempts to exercise fundamental rights. Such challenges are particularly formidable when they come in the form of legislation, regulation, and official policy. Anti-LGBTI laws include laws penalizing consensual same-sex sexual activity with fines, jail terms, and the death penalty. In 2011, the United Nations Human Rights Council passed its first resolution recognizing LGBT rights, followed by a report from the UN Human Rights Commission documenting rights violations of LGBT people and a call for all countries to guarantee laws protecting basic LGBT rights. Nevertheless, in Mauritania, Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Iran, homosexuality is punishable with the death penalty, and in 75 countries, criminal laws against sexual activity by LGBTI people are in place. In this class, we will focus in some of the legal challenges to the rights of LGBTI people in 5 countries from different regions: Brazil, Jamaica, Kyrgyzstan, Uganda, and the United States. Brazil accounts for 44% of the world's anti-LGBTI violence. Every 27 hours, a LGBTI person is murdered, and more than half of them are Brazilian trans. It was only in 2011 that Brazil published the first official figures on human rights violations of the LGBT population. After that, the number of complaints grew 166% from 2011 to 2012. According to Human Rights Watch, the Brazilian Human Rights Ombudsman Office received more than 1,500 complaints of violence and discrimination against LGBT persons in 2013. In the first half of 2014, the office reported over 500 complaints, a spike of registered complaints after a presidential candidate called for LGBTI people to get psychological treatment during a televised debate, proving how important it is that mass media either stop human rights violations or to disseminate wrong information. In 2013, Brazil finally legalized same-sex marriages. The Justice Council ordered all civil registries to perform same-sex marriages and to convert any existing civil unions into marriages if the couple so desired. In 2006, Time magazine called Jamaica the most homophobic place on earth. Homosexual acts are still illegal in Jamaica, levying sentences of up to 10 years of imprisonment with hard labor for those convicted under a number of articles, the most used being Article 76 of the Offenses Against the Person Act, also known as the Buggery Statute. Article 76 states, "Whosoever shall be convicted of the abominable crime of buggery, anal intercourse, committed either with mankind or with any animal, shall be liable to be imprisoned and kept to hard labor for a term not exceeding 10 years. While arrest under this and other laws is not the primary concern, laws are used to justify other rights violations, legitimizing discrimination and violence towards LGBT people. Between 2009 and 2012, the Jamaican Forum for Lesbians, All Sexuals, and Gays documented 231 reports of discrimination and violence based on gender identity and/or sexual orientation, a majority against youth. same-sex activity was decriminalized in 1998, before the consolidation of the democratic rule in 2010. Yet, this has not meant much for its queer community. Currently, there are no anti-discrimination laws or officially recognized same-sex relationships, and there's no way to change sex or gender on official records. More importantly, violence and anti-LGBTI animus is universal, following the region's trend led by Russia. According to Human Rights Watch, violence, rape, psychological abuse, confinement, and stigmatization are widespread and rarely reported or prosecuted. In addition, an anti-gay propaganda proposed law is being debated. Among many provisions, considers that any type of distribution of positive information on same-sex relationships is a crime punishable by fines and a jail sentence. In Uganda, homophobia has been widespread since the prohibition of homosexuality in the 1950s. But it wasn't until February 2010 that President Museveni signed a law that not only outlawed homosexual acts, but also compelled citizens to compel suspected homosexual activity to the police, triggering increased levels of prejudice, violence, and discrimination against the LGBT community. It was the peak of a process started in 2005, when the president signed a constitutional amendment prohibiting same-sex marriages, making Uganda the second country in the world to do so. Since then, several laws and measures were taken to undermine the protection of LGBTI rights in the country. In 2009, the first anti-homosexuality bill was introduced to Parliament. In 2012, the Speaker of the Parliament promised to enact a revised law to create even harsher penalties. In 2014, the proposal was signed into law, but overwhelming condemnation and a victorious court battle followed. Uganda's constitutional court annulled on the grounds that it lacked the quorum for the voting. Parliamentarians quickly signed a petition to introduce a new and more draconian law. In rankings of the worst places for LGBTI population, Uganda is high up at third place, only after Senegal and Pakistan. The efforts made by its government to criminalize same-sex relationships certainly influenced the high levels of homophobia seen today. Reports from LGBTI activists paint a horrible picture of persecution and violence. In the US, the LGBTI community faces discrimination in their daily lives, and their recognition of LGBT rights varies state by state. 17 states plus the District of Columbia ban discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, employment, housing, and public accommodations. Yet, anti-sodomy laws are still in the books in 13 states, and more than 100 bills curtailing LGBTI rights have been filed in 29 state legislatures. Also, there is an increase in the number of bills targeting transgender people for discrimination, such as barring access to or even criminalizing the use of appropriate facilities, including restrooms, or restricting transgender students' ability to fully participate in school. Further, violent attacks against the LGBTI community are not uncommon. And recently, we witnessed the deadliest incident of violence against LGBTI people in the United States, where a gunman killed 49 people and injured 53 others in a gay club in Orlando, Florida. However, a positive step in the US is that same-sex marriage is now legal across the country. In a historic ruling on the case of Obulgari versus Hodges, the Supreme Court found attempts to ban same-sex marriage unconstitutional and ensure that same-sex couples in all 50 states have the right to have their marriages recognized wherever they live. This quick overview of the LGBTI rights in the 5 countries from different world regions shows that while there has been some advancements, laws still discriminate against the LGBTI community. Interestingly, according to a recent global survey, when asked whether human rights should be applied to everyone regardless of whom they feel attracted to or the gender they identify with, a stunning 67% of the interviewees agreed. The analysis of this data paints both positive and troubling pictures. Acceptance of the LGBTI persons seems to have grown consistently worldwide over the past years, yet equality still lies very far from achievement.